Are now at the end, last session of Bengal Delta Conference 2025. So we have with us very vibrant panel. Please welcome Michael Kugelman, Senior Fellow, Asia-Pacific Foundation, Dr. Sreeradha Datta, Professor, International Affairs, OP Jindal Global University, Dr. Amena Mohsin, Professor, Retired, International Relations, Dhaka University, New Haibin, Associate Research Fellow and Director, Institute of Foreign Policy Studies, Director, Center for Latin America Studies, Shanghai, Institute for International Studies, SIIS, and of course, Dr. Shahab Enam Khan, who will moderate this session, Professor, Department of International Relations, Bangladesh University of Professionals, BUP. The discussion will be on From Confluence to Cohesion, Bangladesh Role in Regional Formation Across Asia.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting a panel discussion on From Confluence to Cohesion, Bangladesh's role in regional formation across Asia. So this is a session where we are going to look into not only the Asian dimensions of regionalism, but we will also be touching upon the issues that creates or enables the process of regionalism in the Asian theater. We have a very distinguished pool of experts who will be speaking today with Michael Kugelman, who has been a friend for a long time. Is a senior fellow at Asia-Pacific Foundation, and he's a regular writer at the Foreign Policy magazine. Michael will give the keynote presentation. We have Dr. New Haibin, who's an associate research fellow and director of the Institute for Foreign Policy Studies and the Center for Latin American Studies at the Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, which is a institute of global reputation, which dedicates itself to understand international relations across the global spectrum. We do have Professor Dr. Sreeradha Datta, a dear friend of Bangladesh, who's a professor of international affairs at the OP Jindal Global University. And then, of course, Professor Dr. Amena Mohsin, and I take the privilege of telling that Professor Mohsin was my teacher, and most importantly, if I do anything good, credit goes to me. Anything bad I do, discredit goes to Professor Mohsin. With that note, since our colleague from Shanghai Institutes will be leaving soon because he has a flight to catch, before Michael speaks, I'm going to invite Dr. New Haibin so that he doesn't miss the flight and can safely go back to Beijing, not falling into the American trap of rhetorics. And therefore, Dr. Haibin, the floor is yours. We are expecting that you will be speaking about the new reality in terms of regionalism, particularly after the Trump administration's new tariff war and so on. We are now seeing the need for alternative regionalism is coming in. And we are now seeing that China has become an integrated part of Asian economy, particularly the South Asian economy, where we now see more than $200 billion of trade is happening between South Asia and China. China's flagship project, which is BRI, which is estimated to be an engagement of $1.308 billion. And given all these realities, the economics, politics, strategic interests, how do you see that the Asian region, and more particularly South Asian region, has the potential to become much more regionally active, integrated, and cooperative? Floor is yours, Dr. B.
Thank you very much. I'm apologize for this change of the order of the presentation, since I have to catch the flight. As to the regionalism, I think we have several models across the globe. maybe the most famous and successful one is the European model. It's legal and regional integration. And also we have the North American model, which was supported by a very strong, effective regional free trade agreement. And also we have in the global south all kinds of regional cooperation practices. Like in Africa, they are trying to establish a continental free trade network. So it seems that the Asian regionalism has run behind these global practices. However, I want to emphasize the regional economic dynamic of Asia-Pacific is quite strong. And when we talk about Latin America's regionalism, and most of the Latin American countries, their trade partner located other continents, especially Asia-Pacific, North America. Why? When you talk about that, because Latin America lack of the regional connectivity. But in Asia, we have a very good regional connectivity infrastructure. Due to the past several decades, we have made efforts to build closer regional physical connectivity and also all kinds of sub-regional free trade arrangement, like RCEP. So, which makes the region of the Asia Pacific quite dynamic. But also, we have some challenges of the great power competitions. So we have different initiatives supported by the major powers. But there is lack of the coordination among these major initiatives. That's a challenge for the region. So I guess the major powers should sit together and talk about that to build the consensus. And at the same time, we have to not overlook the role of the middle powers, especially the ASEAN countries. We have the famous ASEAN way. That is the Asian way to deal with regional integration. I think maybe flexibility and respect the sovereignty, focus on the consultation, coordination. These kind of things are quite helpful and pragmatic. So that makes we can cooperate where and when we can cooperate. But let's look at the future, especially the global impact of the Trump administration. So, and also the pandemic impact on the regional thinking. So the major regions and major economies of the big regions, they want to build some regional supply chains, not only on the economic factors, but also on security and also like the public health system. So regions are becoming more important in a globalized world because we have to build a regional resilience and also we have to think from a perspective of a region than to deal with the global challenges and the transnational challenges, issues like climate change, the non-traditional security threats, and the public health problems, refugees, immigrants, these kind of things. So we have to build this sub-regional and regional network and mechanisms. So in this context, I think the BRICS, the SCO, the major emerging economies like China, India, should play a leading role by providing more public goods, not only of the overseas investment, but also this kind of institutional building, like the AIIB, it's Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and BRICS Plus, extending its membership to the middle income countries of the region. So by building this kind of inclusive regional framework, we can invite the countries have bilateral disputes or problems can sit together. Like Pakistan and India can be the members of the SCO, and China and India can be the BRICS. So maybe I think China and India China should and will play a role to promote the regional stability of the South Asia and providing more public goods to promote the regional integration of South Asia. Then South Asia will play its potential role in connecting the whole Asia. I think that will be the future scenarios. Maybe it's a little bit too idealism for me, but I think the future is there. We have to think about it, especially in a multipolar and deglobalized world. So that's my observation about this. I'm sorry I have to miss the following presentations. The loss is mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haibin. And I think you have really touched upon very important issues, particularly when we are looking at the sub-regionalism and its synchronization with the regionalism. I mean, whether we take it from BIMSTEC to Global South or Global South to BRICS and so on. And I think that's a major, major issue. And definitely you have highlighted the critical issue that has really emerged after the COVID, the necessity to preserving and stabilizing the supply chain. And I think this is where the major geopolitics is unfolding. So is the potential for different countries to come together and work together from the regional prism. You have really mentioned about the middle powers, which is the ASEAN way. And I think something that we would be expecting from Dr. Datta at some point of time, how these particular connectivity and how we can learn from different regions, particularly ASEAN, comparing with BIMSTEC and SAARC. And then you have talked about the coordination of major initiatives by the major powers, including the Bretton Woods or the alternative institutions such as AIIB or NDB, the New Development Bank, or the proposed BRICS Bank, and so on. And I think you have highlighted the very important issue of regional connectivity. And I think this is one of the key areas that South Asia is struggling. And this is the key area that will dominate this particular discussion over the next hour. And I think my friend Michael Kugelman will also be looking into the case examples of BIMSTEC and SAARC and so on. And the final point that you have highlighted is the new Trump administration, and particularly the new Trump administration's political, economic, or perhaps resource positions have significant impact on the bilateralism or multilateralism, and perhaps what you have mentioned is the multipolarity that is reinforcing across the world. And I think those are very, very solid points that merits an extensive discussion, not only within these platforms, but beyond. Thank you very much, Dr. Haibin, and we wish you a safe flight back to China, and we convey our best regards to our friends in China. Thank you very much, Dr. Haibin.
Thank you very much.
I'm going back to the original format of this particular discussion, which is to be kicked off with Michael Kugelman's keynote presentation. And I think Michael will be focusing on the theme of today, and he will see it from a greater perspective at the broader spectrum of institutionalism, regionalism, and most certainly multilateralism.
Thank you very much, Shahab. I think you've practiced a very effective form of strategic balancing. You had our Chinese speaker go first, and then you had the US speaker give the keynote. So thank you for that. Thank you very much to Daira. The last 2 days have just been a fascinating and enriching experience for me. As I said yesterday, I'll say it again now, that I think that the model here of a youth-led organization and a youth-led conference is very admirable, and I hope that it's replicated elsewhere. Very grateful to be a part of this panel. I think the topic of this session invites a definitional question, and that is, what is Asia? It's a term that I think is tough to conceptualize. We know the importance of Asia. We know it's the world's most populous region. We know it's the world's most economically dynamic region. We know it's the Asian century. But we often struggle to define and agree on the geographic parameters and boundaries of Asia. There's so many ways of talking about Asia and its constituent parts, its subregions: South Asia, East Asia, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, Southwest Asia. There are also those parts of Asia that are in Asia territorially but don't have the word Asia in their name. For example, Bay of Bengal, Pacific Rim, Indian Ocean region. Those are maritime spaces, but then you've got land masses like the Caucasus, and so on. Some of the debate around these constituent parts of Asia are fraught. Many Indians do not like the term South Asia. The US doesn't use terms like West Asia and Southwest Asia. And the battle royale between Indo-Pacific and Asia-Pacific continues to play out between the US and its allies and partners, and China and Russia. In my brief comments, I'll address this definitional dilemma by being rather selfish and focusing on those parts of Asia with which I happen to have the most familiarity, South Asia as well as Southeast Asia. And the added benefit of this approach is that these are also the two parts of Asia that are most proximate to Bangladesh and most relevant to its interests, in my view. Let me also make a definitional caveat about another aspect of the topic of our discussion. One can define the term regional formation in different ways. I will define it as a process to strengthen cohesion and linkages between geographically contiguous states, a process to bolster regional integration and connectivity. So in looking at how Bangladesh can play a part in regional formation in Asia, there's a dilemma for Bangladesh as I see it. The most dynamic areas for regional formation are in sub-regions of Asia where Bangladesh is the least equipped to contribute. And in the one area where Bangladesh is best equipped to contribute, you're looking at a part of Asia that is not currently hardwired for regional integration. So what I mean is that there are more opportunities to contribute to regionalism in Southeast Asia. This is true in Central Asia too, I'd argue. So you have relatively effective regional organizations like ASEAN and SCO in Central Asia. You have a fair amount of intra-regional trade. You have the presence of strong emerging economies like Vietnam and Singapore. There are some fraught and disputed borders for sure, but not too many of them. And also, countries in Southeast Asia generally get along. But Bangladesh, I would argue, to be a bit provocative, does not have significant presence and clout and agency in Southeast Asia, at least not now. It has friendly ties with countries in the region. It has friendly ties with the ASEAN states. There are commercial links, but it's not a key player. But by contrast, Bangladesh is best placed to contribute to regional formation matters in South Asia. It is Bangladesh's neighborhood. It's where it has equities, relationships, proximity, familiarity. But there are currently hard limits on regionalism in South Asia. There's the notoriously poorly functioning regional organization SAARC. There's the India-Pakistan problem. Bilateral ties are tenser now than at any time in recent decades due to the recent India-Pakistan conflict. In the past, India-Pakistan crises and conflicts have actually yielded to periods of calmer relations, but that won't be the case this time, in my view. Given how serious the last crisis was, it was the worst crisis between India and Pakistan, the most serious war since 1971. And given the set of punitive steps taken by India, especially its decision to hold the India-Pakistan Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, India-Pakistan ties are going to be in a bad place for a while, and that's going to hurt regional integration prospects. There are disputed and tense borders throughout South Asia, from those with relatively latent tensions, like the India-Nepal and Iran-Pakistan frontiers, to outright conflicted or disputed borders like the India-Pakistan, Pakistan-Afghanistan, India-China, and of course the Myanmar-Bangladesh frontiers. South Asia has fairly little cross-border infrastructure and trade, and it has quite a few fragile economies and not that many dynamic economies. This does not bode well for regional integration prospects. And the World Bank, among others, as I'm sure you all know, have described South Asia as the least regionally integrated region in the world aside from sub-Saharan Africa. So given this conundrum, what can Bangladesh do to help strengthen regionalism? First, some context about Bangladesh's capacities are in order here as I see them. So there are things that both help and hinder Bangladesh. What helps Bangladesh when it comes to playing a role in region formation? For one thing, it's agile foreign policy. It's non-aligned, it aims to balance ties with everyone. I don't think we've moved away from the friendship to all, malice toward none line that we all know. And I think recent signaling on this is hard to miss. So some weeks ago, a senior diplomat from Bangladesh met with a senior diplomat from China and Pakistan at a regional summit in China. After that meeting, the Chinese and Pakistani governments released statements in which they celebrated this new trilateral mechanism and talked about future meetings of this trifecta. The response from the government here, as I'm sure many of you will recall, was very different. The government downplayed this new arrangement, did not commit to any future commitments between this grouping, and perhaps that might have been a signal from Dhaka that it didn't want to be involved in any type of mechanism that might come across as alliance-like behavior. Before that, if you go back to 2023, the government in Bangladesh, the previous government, released its Indo-Pacific outlook. Now, it was not a strategy or a policy, it was an outlook. And that's significant because it made it seem more flexible. And indeed, the Indo-Pacific outlook, Bangladesh's Indo-Pacific outlook espouses principles of both the US Indo-Pacific strategy and China's foreign policy. So it talks about free and open, rules-based nature, all of that, but it also talks about issues that are important for Chinese foreign policy, like territorial integrity and so on. So I see this as a case of balancing between two rival superpowers. So this all helps Bangladesh. This foreign policy of non-alignment or autonomy gives Bangladesh flexibility. Also, Bangladesh has good relations with non-resident powers and other external stakeholders in South Asia, China, Japan, the UK, the EU, Russia, and the US, along with IFIs like the World Bank and the ADB, among others. Now, what hinders Bangladesh in its role in regional formation? Well, for one thing, it does not have a diversified export economy, which limits the scope and scale of regional trade possibilities. The relatively low levels of incoming FDI coming into Bangladesh and an underwhelming private sector also constrain cross-border commercial activity. Also, tensions with India. It's a lot easier to be more active in your region if ties are good with the region's biggest player. Additionally, the Myanmar crisis next door. This undercuts connectivity prospects, especially when you've got an armed actor controlling nearly the entire Myanmar border with Bangladesh. So as I conclude, what are Bangladesh's options moving forward? One thing I'd recommend is leverage BIMSTEC. It's more robust than SAARC, that's very clear. SAARC matters, or at least it should matter. It's one of the only platforms where all the countries in South Asia can be on an equal footing with India. But it will be hard to revitalize SAARC with India-Pakistan tensions worse now than in past years. As I'm sure you all know, decision-making in SAARC revolves around unanimity. So when you have two countries that basically don't agree on much, you're not going to get very far. So BIMSTEC offers the best possibility for now. Another thing I'd recommend, think sub-regional, not regional formation. That is where it's at these days. South Asia cannot do region-wide activities. We're seeing parallel efforts to drive connectivity and integration on each side of South Asia. So to the western parts of South Asia, you have Pakistan looking to develop connectivity projects with Afghanistan onward into Central Asia, with China playing a catalyst role too. Beijing has spoken of bringing BRI into Afghanistan. Pakistan-Afghanistan ties have been tense since the Taliban returned in Afghanistan, but this won't prevent cooperation on connectivity issues. The Taliban have said that they support cross-border and transnational connectivity projects, including those with Pakistan. And meanwhile, to the eastern parts of South Asia, you have efforts within the BIMSTEC states. Bangladesh, India, and Nepal have an electricity sharing deal that was launched not long ago. Bangladesh's ties with India are tense, but not so tense that they can't cooperate on connectivity projects. Bangladesh has the capacity to be part of both parallel tracks of sub-regionalism in South Asia, and that's not something that one can say about many of the South Asian states. It's already enmeshed in these eastern efforts through the electricity scheme with Nepal and India. Also, so long as Bangladesh's ties continue to resurge with Pakistan, it can look into being a part of efforts between Afghanistan and Pakistan to forge more connectivity links there. Another option for Bangladesh, focus more on its own backyard. There's so much about the Bay of Bengal region that lends itself to collaborations between states. The Bay of Bengal states are all looking at serious and, in some cases, in the case of climate change, existential future threats. You have sea level rise, flooding, other destructive weather events, and so on. There's a lot of potential scope for the Bay of Bengal states to work together on things like, for example, the joint development of early warning systems. The problem is that you have fraught relationships among some of the Bay of Bengal states, namely India and Pakistan. But it's still worth probing the possibilities for even modest cooperation within this sub-region beyond merely BIMSTEC and including all of the Bay of Bengal states in an effort to help strengthen resilience against shared threats. And it's notable that even India and Pakistan in just the last few days have used humanitarian grounds to justify cooperation. India's shared information with Pakistan about possible cross-border flooding risks, and indeed Pakistan has been hit by serious flooding the last few days. So I'll close very briefly with some signposts to watch for that could help us understand the trajectory of Bangladesh's role in regional formation and ability to make meaningful contributions. One is the fate of Bangladesh's ties with India and Pakistan. If it can patch up ties with India and maintain its growing friendship with Pakistan, it can facilitate more sustained roles in different sub-regional activities in South Asia. I suspect the next elected government in Bangladesh will want to get relations with India back to a better place, while also balancing ties with Pakistan and making sure they stay friendly and active. Another signpost to watch for is the degree of engagement with extra-regional groupings like ASEAN and SCO, but even the BRICS. These days, you don't need to be part of a region to play a role in that region's main regional grouping. Bangladesh's involvement with these entities would arguably give it more leverage within Asia. SCO started as a China and Russia-led Central Asia-focused security group, but its membership has since expanded to include India and Pakistan. ASEAN is for Southeast Asian states, but there are potential roles for outside states to hold observer or guest status. BRICS, finally, is a truly global entity, not Asia-focused. It has a lot of momentum these days as it's been able to capitalize on growing global discontent, especially in the global south, with US-led and Western-led economic models in the world order. If Bangladesh could play some type of role in it, even if short of formal membership, that could give it more leverage when operating closer to home. BRICS has a good reputation within the broader global south, and so Bangladesh's involvement in it could help bolster its ties with some of its neighbors. Several years ago, there was buzz that Bangladesh might join the BRICS because of the strength of its economy and close ties with all permanent members. Didn't end up happening, and the India factor in its sliding economy may hamper its prospects for membership today, but it's still something worth tracking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such an enlightening discussion, proposing different models for Bangladesh to think about when it comes to regionalism, whether it is from the West Asian perspective to East Asian perspective. And of course, the major issue, even Dr. Haibin also mentioned the term Asia-Pacific, not the Indo-Pacific. And you have rightly mentioned that this particular nomenclature, that how the countries are now seeing one sees from a very maritime perspective, which is the US, and the Chinese and the Russians are seeing, or even to a great extent, Indians are seeing from both land and maritime perspective. And I think the definitional caveat is very much there about the regionalism. Different countries pursue different ideas about regionalism. You have highlighted Bangladesh's dilemma, whether it is best equipped to look at the southeastern side, or the best equipped to really contribute to the South Asian spectrum of its relationship. And I'm quite sure the issue of Bangladesh's Indo-Pacific outlook, which is a balance between the principles of territorial integrity by the Chinese and the Americans looking, or the Western looking forward to the rules-based institutions, is, I think, one of the critical factor that is an option for Bangladesh to look into in future. And the whole idea of Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan, China orbit, as well as Bangladesh, China, India orbit, or perhaps Bangladesh, India, Pakistan orbit you have mentioned, whether the future government in Bangladesh will be dedicated to return to its policy in which both India and Pakistan will feature as important factor. And global South's discontent is another major issue. And I'm quite sure Bangladesh's membership will become a little bit difficult now after cutting a very good deal, tariff deal with the US last month, in which Bangladesh's tariff is now standing at the 20% flat rate. So I think these are the issues that will have a critical factor or influence over Bangladesh's foreign policy towards regional integration and cooperation. With that note, Michael, I mean, I'll be turning to Professor Amena Mohsin, and I think there are three major issues that came out from your discussion and Dr. Haibin's discussion. But at the end of the day, regionalism is also political. And when we look into the political perception about regionalism, we get to see sub-region, we get to see minilateralism, you have seen Quad, and so on. Now, these are all the reflection of three important issues: how the states see border, how the states see identity, how the states see nationalism, and how the politicians really see nationalism as a major national security apparatus in determining regionalism in South Asia. And one classic example is, of course, India-Pakistan relationship, which has significantly hindered SAARC, which was conceptualized by Bangladesh back in early 80s, and which had the potential to really get reformed and get the South Asian regional cooperation get a momentum. With all these major political actors, political ingredients within the whole spectrum of regionalism, how do you see that all these major state concepts affects the whole idea of regionalism from Bangladesh's perspective, and definitely within the spectrum of South Asia?
Thank you so much, Shahab, for a very important question. Before I answer your question, like Michael, if I may digress a little bit from your question, when you were talking about the global South, I guess one has to be mindful that there is, I mean, the idea of global South itself is a problematic one. I mean, there is no such thing as a global South. It's a very differentiated global South. And this brings me to the point of regionalism that you're talking of, because since this is, as I say it, it is a very differentiated South. Like if you look at the variations in the region, you yourself pointed at about North Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia, and how the West would not like to, does not like the categories of West Asia or North Asia. So, there are variations. And the variations exist not only at the political level, but also at the economic level. And so with that in mind, I mean, when you ask me this question that, how regionalism is viewed by different stakeholders, by the state, by the politicians, and of course by the people themselves, okay? So I would say that from the Bangladesh perspective, I think regionalism is something that Bangladesh really aspires to. Because for a country like Bangladesh, looking at our foreign policy options, multilateralism is I would say, not only the only, but the best option for us. I mean, this is why Bangladesh has always consistently insisted on multilateralism or multilateral forums on various issues. And there are valid reasons for that also, which are very pragmatic and I think also very rational for Bangladesh. So that is something, I mean, if you ask me for the state, from the statist perspective. And that is important and that is critical. And you know, if you look at Bangladesh, we are the pioneers or dreamers of SAARC. BIMSTEC is headquartered in Bangladesh. BIMSTEC is headquartered in Dhaka. And BBIN, you know, look at the initiatives. We are part of X number of different regional organizations because we believe in diversifying our foreign policy, and we cannot afford to put all our eggs in one basket. One has to understand that. And particularly with what has happened in the United States recently, if you look at, and the kind of, we talked about populism a little bit in the earlier session, the kind of populist politics and also the rise of rightist forces across the world, states are becoming very territorialized, and not only territorialized, also, you know, like very closed. And US is a good example. I mean, you talked about rule-based institutions. I mean, this is something one has to take with a pinch of salt, I think, today. How institutions are being challenged. So these are important factors. So at this point of time, though we use the term Global South, but again, I would say that countries like Bangladesh would have to look for options not only in South Asia, but also Southeast Asia in terms of diversifying its foreign policy. For the politicians, I think they play their cards. You know, whichever political party is in power, like BNP always aspired, you know, for SAARC because after all, its founder, Ziaur Rahman, was the dreamer of SAARC. And so did Ershad, President Ershad, and other political parties in Bangladesh also do that. But with the Awami League, we did see that there was a shift towards sub-regionalism because of its relationship with India. Maybe Radha is better equipped, or Radha would be talking about it. But from the people's perspective, I think that is very critical for me because I think the major success of SAARC was that it gave us a platform where the academics, where the media, where the cultural activities, even the parliamentarians, even, you know, persons who were elected from the local government level, women's movement, I mean, all these came together and they could talk. You know, there were student exchanges. So SAARC did give us that platform, but we saw that with the kind of, I don't want to use the word demise, but the dormant state of SAARC, that came to a very stalemated position. And we did talk about X number of connectivities, sub-regionalism, BIMSTEC. But if you really look into it, I mean, we talked about connectivity a lot, but it was essentially infrastructural connectivity. But there was no connectivity of minds. So for me, if you want to have a South Asia, you know, that South Asianness has to be there. I would again emphasize on the word South Asianness, the ness of it, because that is the meeting of people's minds and where you can identify yourself as a South Asian. But we don't. I think there, the women's movement, the feminists they have played a very critical role. And I think people at, I mean, Ashish Nandi puts it very beautifully, that there is a South Asia of the state, and there is a South Asia where, you know, for lack of better words, I'm saying smugglers, or you can say informal trade, or the culture, you know, the cultural activities are going on. So that is something I think very, and you can see that the same songs being sung in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, I can't talk much about Nepal and Sri Lanka, but of course, the national anthems of our, like Bangladesh has been written by Tagore. Then you look at the marching song of the Indian Army, that was by Allama Iqbal. So that connectedness is there. And but again, the visa regime is so strict. That is something also one needs to take into account. And I would just conclude by saying that for me, regionalism is not only, as you said, it's a political category, but for me it is also very much a sociological and cultural category. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. I have given you 1 minute extra. During my tutorial exams, you never gave me 1 minute extra. So I have grown up to a very fine man. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Professor Mohsin has really highlighted the necessity of multilateralism, and I think that is the key. And given the global changes, the fluidity in geopolitics, and I think Bangladesh has maneuvered rightly through the multilateralism. And at least if you look at our last 1 year of foreign policy, we have maintained a very solid relationship with Beijing. We have maintained a very solid relationship with Washington, D.C., which has been manifested into a very successful trade deal. And I think that really gives us a solid hope that multilateralism will prevail in the coming years, despite the whirlwind that we get to see in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think one very important point that Professor Mohsin has very eloquently elaborated on is that we have always invested in the infrastructural connectivity rather than the intellectual or connectivity of minds, which is very important to build a solid relationship across the states. And I think one critical issue is the issue of visa regime came up. I mean, despite we being geographically connected, I mean, I think we have the, let me use the term, weirdest possible visa regime in the world. I mean, if you look at current state of visa regime between Bangladesh or India, or even if you look at the changing visa regime between Bangladesh and Pakistan, everything is quite phenomenal. And I think that is very important to understand that visa doesn't really restrict movement. Rather, what it restricts is the intellectual dependency and the South Asian-ness that we think is very important if we want to improve our common wealth and common goal for common development. With that note, I'm turning to Dr. Sreeradha Datta, and I think Dr. Sreeradha Datta has an expertise on regionalism, and I think there are several issues that probably will come up. If you look at BIMSTEC, Professor Datta, it's a $5.2 trillion GDP. But on the other hand, South Asia is $4.5 trillion economy. I mean, if you heard Professor Mohsin, that informal trade is so astronomically high than formal trade, which makes the entire region more prone or encouraged rather to remain informal to a great extent. Now, that kind of situation is not really the best of situation when it comes to human security, when it comes to human development, when it comes to resource distribution. And I'm quite sure if you look at Bangladesh's relationship with India, particularly after the July movement, the Great July Movement 2024, I mean, Bangladesh was the largest South Asian trading partner of India. India was Bangladesh's largest trading partner within the South Asian context. And we both, Bangladesh and India, has strong relationship with China, United States, and now Bangladesh's relationship with Pakistan is growing. And I think at the same time, we have the Southeast Asia, the ASEAN way that Michael has talked about. You have seen, despite Vietnam War, Cambodia, Thailand relationship, Myanmar being in a disarray, ASEAN has 25% plus trade, And South Asia has less than 5% of trade. Now, where do we go from here? How do we bring back confidence on regionalism? How do we bring back the spirit of commonwealth, resource sharing, and aspiring for a solid supply chain that will help us in strengthening the economy, creating resilient economy, and most importantly, the relationship among the states more stable and better. With that note.
Thank you, Shahab. That's a lot to begin with, but let me just try and attempt this. If you're just looking at the regionalism in South Asia or Asia, as I think both all the three speakers talked about it, there is a certain amount of momentum that has gathered, whether it's at the BRICS level, at the SCO level, and of course India and ASEAN. The Indian ASEAN Plus group, the ARF group, all of that is doing well, and it has a certain stakeholders. Constantly there is a attempt to speed up the process and look at many other entities that we could work with. The problem area also, and let's, also India by itself has, as supported the Sagar policy, which was basically connecting again the Indian Ocean, the ARF, and also the ASEAN maritime connectivity and all of that. The problem, as I see it, is really located in South Asia. Now, there are two very simplistic response to that. I'll do this in the sake of this, today's audience. That unlike the other regions, in South Asia, the threat is from within. Now, we can call it a mental cobweb that India has, or whatever, we've shared these issues over the last 2 days, but the threat perception, the specter of threat that India faces or the rest of the smaller countries vis-a-vis India is something so tangible that none of have been. We keep talking about this trust deficit and all kinds of other terminology, but it's a fact on the ground that there has been many incidences that we've seen how smaller countries have felt that India hasn't, has not delivered the way it was. India felt betrayed and let down with the smaller, regional countries. But more importantly, and I think that's something we should try and also, see if that works. In most of the other regional attempts, there has been a drive from an external player, which is singularly lacking in South Asia. ASEAN worked, let's face it, ASEAN worked because US was so keen and ensured that, the pathways would be facilitated. There were many other mechanisms which were put in place, and so forth for many other regions. In South Asia, that hasn't been the case. As we know, in the initial days when, it was mooted by Bangladesh, it took India for a while to actually adjust to that idea, and that it's not a question of smaller countries ganging against India, right? That was the initial hesitation that India had. And then subsequently we've seen, and I don't want to get into this typical problem that we faced within the, even when at the very basic level, when we were looking at SAPTA much more closely, leave alone the free trade area, even then when you are discussing connectivity areas in terms of the road transit, which has still not come through, BBI was mooted way back in 1988, if I'm not mistaken. Who stopped BBI at that point of time? I think the answers are known to some of us who work on the region, and I don't want to, as I said, this is not a time to, but that has been, that element continues to be there. For right reasons, wrong reasons, whatever the case is, and India has not been able to overcome that. The other state, particularly the Western neighbor that we are discussing, has not been able to, address that. So it is in that context, if you recall, when we signed, there's also a problem, as I said, the smaller countries are very apprehensive about India. Let me go back to BBIN, which is one of the core connectivity corridors that we were looking at the region. It was 4 of us, and I sat through a lot of these bilateral dialogues on BBIN, so I'm saying this from my knowledge base there. Bhutan was hesitant. They kept citing environmental issues, which we know that they're far more sensitive to environmental degradation and all of that, which we at that point of time we were not so. But the real reason was something else, and none of the smaller countries, and that is true for today also, will actually openly tell you, and the fact on the ground is, and I think a Bangladeshi participant in one of the track 1.5 that we were doing said it straight, that it's basically India's vehicular advantage, makes the smaller countries so reticent to be part of the BBIN system. So finally, when we were about to sign BBIN, just like literally hours before, Bhutan said, I'm stepping out. So you had to redraft the whole thing, right? And then we signed, 3 countries signed it. Nepal, Bhutan, and Nepal, Bangladesh, and India. Now, Nepal was the first country that actually ran a trial run of the BBIN. When we hadn't even signed it. But when we actually were able to implement, and we are looking at that stage that we can now make it a seamless, it's also helpful that India and Bangladesh came together on the transport corridor. Bangladesh gave India transit, India built all the cross-border connectivity. So it was going to be a seamless transport movement from Dhaka to Kolkata to Northeast to, forward to Southeast Asia, wherever you want to take your cargo to. Suddenly, again in the last minute, firstly we were debating for 3 years whether it was just cargo or it was human traffic also. Passenger traffic or cargo. It took the 3 countries for 3 years to decide on that. Finally, when it was decided, again couple of months before we were going to sign the new instrument, Nepal stepped out. Again on the fear that because most of these, in South Asia, most of these countries use the company trucks which are made in India. They were apprehensive that because the fact that India has, weightage in that sense, and will be able to. Bangladesh was only one. Of course, we know the political environment in Bangladesh was very conducive. So even though they were very wary about the fact that Indian truckers would take care of the entire, transport system, they were still willing to, and there was some kind of a negotiated deal on that. But Nepal stepped out. So I'm just saying a simple thing like a seamless cargo, which have been beneficial for all the countries, even on the Bhutan context. In Bhutan, again, as I said, they did highlight environmental, but that was not the real reason. We had actually argued, and I remember that was at a paper, and I think at SIIS I probably had used that paper, that we bring the cargo, the truckload to Bhutan's border, and then it is Bhutan's responsibility to take it indoors, so that we are not responsible for the degradation of the environment. Even there, Bhutan desisted. So I'm just saying that within South Asia, there is an internal problem. And none of us, and I think I said that in one of my plenary talks yesterday, that we are so reticent to have frank and fair conversation, thinking that what is the other guy going to say? And think. And till we actually break that, and I keep saying this, that India and Bangladesh really need to reset the relationship here. They first, again, they have to go back, forget what has happened in the past. We have to stop. I can see the kind of animosity which has happened within Bangladesh about India. I completely understand that. But I'm saying we have to go far beyond because, and I think it's a known fact to everyone, if regionalism was going to be effective in South Asia, India and Bangladesh were actually able to create that hub of network. And also when we talk about global supply chains, and I remember again a project that I'd done which is out there in the public domain about how I got Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh on that. And I said, Sri Lankan and Indian labor. Bangladesh was also going to give us the SEZ, and Nepal, we had also identified that. But again, we went up to a certain stage, again, these countries stepped out of it. Now, the fear is again that India, given its wherewithal, given its capacity, would, steamload the whole thing. Maybe that's a reality on the ground, but that stopped. So we were saying when we are building the, for instance, Pran has a factory in Agartala, right? Now the business operations are actually done from Dubai Pran. The finance, the funding, and it's not from the Dhaka plant because we have an old instrument which said that Pakistan is not going to be part of the financial instrument in India. Now, that's dead and gone 50 plus years ago. We haven't been able to do that. So there are lots of NTBs even today, like you mentioned the black market smuggling. Standardizations and all other problems continue to be there on the ground. 21, we actually brought down the entire tariff barriers, right, except for contraband item. But the NTBs still exist. The bureaucratic, I don't know how it works in South Asia really, but every time the political leaders, whenever they meet, they have been very, very upbeat about these measures and mechanisms. But in every single country, including India, the bureaucratic hurdles have been far too much, which is why even today, despite the fact that, when in 2011, India brought down the entire tariff barriers, I think it was 2014 that China brought down the entire tariff barriers. We had expected, after bringing the tariff barriers, that India and Bangladesh's trade, of course, it's done well, but not maximize the potential that it had. On the contrary, China and Bangladesh were able to do far more, despite the fact that there's a huge trade deficit, but even then they were able to sell more because of the non-tariff barriers being minimized. Unfortunately, in India, the bureaucratic system, and it's true for all the other South Asian countries, we've still not been able to overcome it. Also because I think there's we are being honest in this conversation here today. I think all of us in South Asia have our eye parked elsewhere. The extra region, I'll wrap this up by saying that for all of us, yes, it is the least integrated, 2% of the trade is happening, simply because each one of us, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's India, all of us are far more invested in the trade that we do in the extra region. That's paid as dividends. So I'm just saying that why are we wasting our breath? The minute, the momentum, when trade actually will happen, when we forget all this, the internal dynamism will have to take place. While, borders and all of those issues are there, but the seamlessness will only, and again, let's not forget the fact that, cross-border trade can only happen when your maritime movement, your navigation forces are in place. And hopefully with Matarbari, with our Colombo port that we are building, and all of this, political environment, of course, is the first case scenario. Once that is in place, things will have its own momentum, and then again, no leaders will be able to say. But as of now, South Asia is happy doing business with the rest of the world. None of them are very invested or interested in South Asia. So I'm just saying, don't push to the border just now. We'll have to live with it for some time to come, because all of us are doing well. Just because we are not doing trade with each other, doesn't mean that we haven't prospered. Each and every country in South Asia has prospered, right? I'll close and come back for the next round.
Thank you, Dr. Datta. And I think that was fascinating. I mean, of course, you have highlighted the Indian initiative called Sagar. And then, of course, one very critical issue, and I think I should thank you for saying that the threat actually comes from within, rather than our favorite blaming the rest of the world for everything that has happened in South Asia. And of course, environmental issues and so on came up. And one of the critical factor is that minilateralism, our experiment and experiences with minilateralism has not really gone quite far. And I think the big elephant over here is, as you have rightly mentioned, is the trust deficit, whether it is at the bureaucratic level, whether it is at the private sector level, or whether it is at the end of the political level. And I think those are the different tiers of problems that we encounter on a daily basis. Even when you mentioned about BBIN, relegated to BIN, and then when we had BCIM, relegated to BCM. So either India steps out or Nepal steps out, everybody steps out. That's the problem. I mean, and I think this is where we need to have our trust building and capacity building. But we've been talking about it for last 5 decades now. I mean, and God knows whether we will be discussing another 5 decades. Meanwhile, you have rightly mentioned about the Colombo port, the Indian Colombo port, and then the Chinese Colombo port. Poor one Colombo having 2 ports, and then have to find out which one is our friend. And then another level of pressure comes over. 5,000 NTVs are there, non-tariff barriers between Bangladesh and India. We have para-tariff, we have banking system which is extraordinarily poor. While the Make in India is largely assembled in India, having things coming from China, but we still have the problem of tariff barrier. Harmonization of HS code has been done, but the problem is anti-dumping is very much there, bureaucratic dumping is very much there, and everything is quite making our trading life quite difficult. With that note, we have our last speaker, Professor Dr. Mehmet Özkan. Thank you very much. Professor Özkan teaches international relations at Joint War Institute at the Turkish National Defense University. Professor Özkan, welcome. We had a fascinating discussion. The keynote paper was presented by Michael Kugelman, who has talked about regionalism from the Asian spectrum. We had Shanghai Institute representative who has talked about the Chinese perspective and the global perspective on how they see South Asian and Asian regionalism, bringing different mechanisms into the play. Professor Mohsin has talked about the very core ingredients of regionalism, starting from border, nationalism, identity, institutions, and so on. Dr. Datta has talked about trade, connectivity, bottlenecks in regional cooperation. With that note, what we were thinking that if you could enlighten us on multiple issues, that how Turkish understanding of new regionalism, which is based on networked cities, which is based on knowledge economies, Turkish development agencies, Black Sea economic cooperation, and your experience with NATO, Europe as well. And I think that is very important for us because we want to see that how the major actor in global security as well as global trading regime like Turkey is shaping the regionalism and understanding of regionalism. Thank you, Dr.
Chair, thank you very much.
Özkan.
I think everything has been spoken. I mean, first of all, I apologize. I had to go to a meeting, so I came a little bit late. Many things has been spoken, but I'll just add some few ideas to the podium to consider perhaps. In the context of it, related to Pakistan, Bangladesh roles in the changing environment, I think transitions, transformations, or whatever you call it, these are all difficult things. And I mean, that does not translate automatically to a better foreign policy sometimes. So the challenge, I think, for me, for example, the biggest change after what happened last year, I mean, this opening the better relation with Pakistan and with Turkey. And I mean, Turkish opening here, I think will contribute a lot. That's now in last 1.5 years, Turkey has been making inroads here, economically and otherwise. But for the countries like this, based on Turkish experience as well, Bangladesh, it is sometimes the main challenge in foreign policy is to have a all-dimensional foreign policy, which means you don't have to have animosity with anyone, but at the same time you should have a workable relations with everyone in the region. That's what we faced in the region in Turkey. I mean, with different problems and issues, we try to manage this either with NATO, with the United States, with Europe, with Middle East, and with different countries. Having a workable relations with the countries that you neighbor or you have to work with. I think once you can reach that level, then I think that shows maturity in foreign policy. Yes, you don't have to succeed, you don't have to do everything with your neighbor, or I mean, those you have good relations, but at least you have a workable relations that is sustainable. That's the biggest challenge, I think, especially for many countries in Asia, as they had to pick up sometimes sites. It mentioned, 2 ports in Colombo, and that is the biggest challenge. Same for Bangladesh, I think. I mean, to have a all-dimensional foreign policy, but a workable relations with all neighbors, including India, Pakistan, and Myanmar, all other nations. I think that is the issue. And also, based on Turkish experience, what I can say, a country's regional role or global role depends much more on their internal stability. If there is no internal stability, politically and also economic-wise, it is difficult to have an active foreign policy. So you end up being passive and following the developments. You become reactive. You cannot plan something because you cannot support your economy. Perhaps your society doesn't support, and your internal dynamics doesn't support. Because when there is lots of fight inside, whether the direction of the country, then how you will have a better and sustainable and coherent foreign policy? That's almost impossible. Those are the challenges that, I mean, Turkish experience, I can say. If you have a sustainable, stable domestic foreign policy, you can have a better foreign policy. And second, if you can develop an all-dimensional foreign policy, workable foreign policy with your neighbor and beyond your neighbors, then you can have influence to some extent, you can change things to some extent. But for us as well, sometimes in that area, we don't have to, we are not like in Asia that you have to pick whether China, India or United States. But our face is in the Middle East is accepting the sometimes Western agenda or rejecting it, literally. That is the dilemma there. So if you don't align with the Western agenda in there, what happens? You may get punished and you may be excluded. That's what's happening in our region. That's our challenge. So our challenge is different than the challenge here. And I believe challenge will intensify here, but challenge in our regions will not be that intensified in coming years as the global politics moves to these directions further possible. That's our challenge. For example, I give you one example. Turkey has bought S-400 from Russia and got punished for that. India has bought S-400 from Russia, but India has been rewarded. For example, Turkey was taken out from F-35 and different issues. Why? Because literally they passed a special legislation from Congress for India, but Turkey was sort of punished. So that's our challenge, mostly with the Western, liberal order. Yes, we are part of it in all aspects, economically, politically, military-wise, through NATO and everything. Yes, at the same time, we don't want to do what they agree on everything. Sometimes we have our own approach, our own understanding, our own national interests that may clash with those who lead that process sometimes. So this has been the challenge in our region. Chair, if you want, let me stop here. Then thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Özkan. And I think if I understand very clearly that when S-400 came, it was more about double standard that we have seen in the case of Turkey and in the case of India. And definitely the global geopolitics is all about national interest, and it is the competing nature of different countries' priorities. And I think that Turkey is a classic example of its foreign policy, which is quite independent in nature, despite being within the structure of NATO. It sees a very positive, it has a positive attitude towards the alternative ones such as BRICS and so on. And I think that is a great case study that we can look into in the future. With that note, I think we have heard our speakers, the keynote speakers and the panel speakers. We have exactly 7 minutes for discussion. If you have any question to the panelists, please introduce yourself and keep your questions within 1 minute or observation and comments. Please kindly introduce yourself and then specify who you want to respond.
This is Imran. I am a banker and also policy analyst, from the economic policy analyst. My question is to Mr. Michael Kugelman. More specifically, in terms of our Asian geopolitics, we all may know that in coming days in future, that one of the major political disruptions may come from non-state actors. Like, we all know that in this region, more specifically in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and also in India, northeast regions, there are insurgents groups. And also in our neighbors in Arakan armies and also like in Kokichins. So these non-state actors, how may they become critical factors in regional formation across Asia about in near future? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. That's a really important part of the story that we didn't cover. It depends on the case. You've mentioned various different types of non-state actors. It could include terrorists. It could include much more benign forces as well. I think all I could say is it really depends on the particular case you're looking at. In certain countries, certainly in Pakistan and Afghanistan to a lesser extent, non-state actors in the form of terrorism, terrorists can become very disruptive, not in terms of becoming political actors, but then again, if you look at what happened to the Taliban in Afghanistan in recent years, it was an insurgency that in some ways depicted itself as a shadow state. It led to a series of developments that led to it to re-seize power. So one could argue that the Taliban were a political actor, and now they are the regime in Afghanistan. And then, Arakan Army obviously represents what I would think to be perhaps the complex challenge that Bangladesh faces geopolitically, right? Is there any other case of a country that looks at its border and sees the other side of the border almost completely controlled by a violent non-state actor, where in that other country, that non-state actor is not in control of the central government? It's very unique and it's very difficult. And the Arakan Army is, I think, de facto a political actor because it has so much control over so much territory. I'll keep things there.
So this is a question, I think, for Sreeradha in particular. This is Mushtaq Khan. And I kind of share your skepticism about how fast things can go. But I think I'm probably even more skeptical than you are. And sometimes perhaps it's better for us to be brutally honest about what's possible. So, we are talking about trucks moving from one country to another country. But if I look at India from Bangladesh, what I see is almost a hysterical response to Muslims. I mean, India is trying to throw out its own Muslims into Bangladesh, saying they are Bangladeshis. There is a movement in Bengal saying we are not Bangladeshi, we are Bengali. There is a movement in Assam to throw out Bangladeshis. We have a movement in Tripura to throw out Bangladeshis. So it's a bit like, if Germany and France were trying to integrate, and Germany had put a fence around France, and any French crossing the fence was shot, and they were identifying pseudo-French people to throw into France, and then saying, can we build a road through France that we can use? It wouldn't work, right? So I think this is not going to work at all, and maybe we should stop talking about interconnectivity. Maybe we should stop talking about roads and rail and transport networks till we've solved the fundamental problem about people. You cannot have trucks moving if you don't trust the people. So we need to work, I think we need to work much more slowly to build confidence that Muslims are not a threat for India. But by the way, in Bangladesh, Hindus are not seen as a threat to Bangladesh. So there is no discourse here about throwing out Hindus because India is your country. There is no discourse like that in Bangladesh. Not even the most right-wing Jamaat or whatever has ever said Hindus don't belong in Bangladesh. So we have a different problem. Minorities here have a different problem. Minorities in India have a different problem. And we both need to be brutally honest about that problem before we start talking about trade and transportation. And I think that, just to end, in the past 15 years, the discourse in Bangladesh was, look at the map. On three sides there is India. Therefore, our dominant partner must be India. And now that is shifting to a different discourse, which is saying, look at the map. On three sides there is India. So we have to have everybody in Bangladesh to balance India. And that is what I think that our Turkish friend was saying. That is what I think our chief advisor is saying, to talk to ASEAN. We need to talk to Indonesia. We need to talk to Pakistan. We need to talk to Turkey. The Americans are very interested here, the Chinese. Because I think that, in a sense, the first thing to do is to normalize the situation. And to normalize the situation, we need to have multilateralism, which all of you have spoken about. So I think maybe we need to have a much more honest discussion with India and be brutally honest about our own internal problems. And we are always told by India what our internal problems are, but we don't hear an honest appraisal from the Indian side about their serious problems with Muslims in India. And that affects Bangladesh. So I just want to put that on the table for us to continue this discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Khan. Dr. Datta, would you like to respond to that briefly?
I fully agree with every point that you've made, and I think there has been some of my writing and talks on this because at this point of time, there's a hyper activity about it, also because of the state elections. And it's nobody's case really, and I think there has been civil society movement about this. But politicians are politicians. We've seen how this particular government in India has functioned. Considering the fact that number of Muslims in our country is larger than many, right? So, I mean, this whole myopic perspective, I mean, really leaves many of us baffled. And I totally agree with you that, and I think there's some point that I've also talked about that India is constantly talking about its own national interest and how it's worried about what others do. What about Bangladesh's national interest? I mean, they could be equally worried, right? And I remember there was some point of time when you remember transit used to be a dirty word in this country. And there were actually people, very balanced, learned people in Bangladesh who would tell me that India is going to get its military troops to the land. I mean, that's not the warfare that we do and indulge in anymore. But I'm saying that threat perception works both ways. And I don't think India has been fully recognized of that. And what they're doing just now at the borders in terms of, identifying, the Bengali speaking in Assam, the particular immigrants in West Bengal, is extremely related to the, state elections which are due in few months. But that's no excuse at all. And I think it's, I think you know my work, and I've actually said this, the particular policy that India is now subscribing to in the last 1 year is going to bite India for years to come. It's not something anybody's going to forget easily, and that's not a fair game for anyone. But I mean, who am I to say anything when, the more informed people think of a particular policy? Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Datta. We are almost at the end moments of this particular session. So I will have 1 minute for each of the panel speakers if they have any comments, observation to add to this particular session. With Professor Mohsin.
Thank you so much, Shahab. Once again, thank you to you for giving me 1 minute. This is in response to the first question that was, in fact, raised for Michael on the question of insurgents, terrorism, all those things. I do believe that insurgency is a different category, terrorism is a different category. So I think one needs to be very careful, and this provides an opportunity for, this is a hurdle as well as provides an opportunity for the South Asian states to work together on these issues. I know that the card of terrorism has been used by states in this region to keep a particular regime in power. Same time, if we can agree on some parameters of where to draw the lines, maybe states can come together and cooperate on these issues. So I would look at it both as a challenge and an opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great discussion. I would just say that Bangladesh has an opportunity now, a geopolitical opportunity in the sense that it seems that the days have passed where its foreign policy will be constrained to a degree by its relationship with India. I'd like to think that no matter who wins the election and leads the next government, we're not going to see the type of relationship with India that was there in the past. Not to say that the relationship won't improve with India, and I hope it does, but during the previous government, as we know, it was a unique type of relationship that I think in many ways constrained Bangladesh's agency to conduct foreign policy with neighbors because of the India factor. So I think there's an opportunity in that regard that hopefully it can capitalize on. Go back to what I said before. Bangladesh it has a flexible foreign policy in the sense that it is able to engage well with countries across regions, mainly in this context, Southeast Asia. So I hope there could be some productive developments that come out of that.
Thank you, Michael.
Just one quick point is, let the states themselves decide where the interests are getting maximized, focus on that, get invested in that. I think we are too emotional about the South Asia space. As I said, all of us are doing well individually without each other. And that's how it's going to be, because I don't see the trust play very well in the next a decade to come. So I'm saying all of us should just look at the energies that we can generate through other mechanisms and measures. Again, in South Asia, I think each state, and it's just not only India, just not only Bangladeshi, they all have to go through a reset. And I don't think that's a plausibility in the closest future, but I'm very upbeat that one day there will be a Shonarodhaya.
In foreign policy, I'm against meta talking, but I'm in favor of meta thinking, but small and planned action and slowly. I think too much meta talking is limits, sometimes put us in illusions. Meta thinking, yes, we should definitely have different perspectives, but I think action is slowly and should be planned well. That's my experience, that's the experience of my country or region as well.
Thank you very much. I think all the panel speakers have really highlighted on the pressing issue that the bottlenecks as well as the solutions for quest for regional cooperation in South Asia. And I take cue from Professor Khan, and I think when Professor Khan has really mentioned about that we really need to look into the micro problems. I mean, particularly the people to people, how politicals essentially determines the relationship. And if I take the July 2024, one pressing question that I was trying to address over the past 1 year, whether Bangladesh, India, Pakistan really sees market as a natural entity. If you look at Bangladesh's connectivity with Nepal through India, which was stopped, and there is no economic rationale and argument behind it. I mean, even if you look at Bangladesh's trade with India through the Assam corridor, again, that was obstacled because there's no plausible argument that why this particular trade has been suspended. I mean, rather it was essentially politically motivated rather than profit motivated. Or perhaps even if you look at the West Bengal now, that the entire West Bengal economy is suffering because that was largely dependent on Bangladesh. So I think the very idea of market, the very idea of private sector driving the economic resources is largely being exploited through the political preferences, whether it is through the color of saffron or whether it is the color of rightism or whichever way, or nationalism. And I think we are very much plagued with all of these things. And that is certainly creating obstacle in building any meaningful institutions, whether it is for the human security, environmental security, or perhaps the security of the states. And that is the reason why Dr. Datta or perhaps Michael has really looked into the future of solution lies within the state's understanding of the necessity, how we can actually bring people into the entire system, which Dr. Khan has also mentioned. And I think Professor Mohsin has also highlighted on the understanding of border, understanding of identity, and understanding how a resource essentially and eventually creates obstacles in our understanding of regionalism. With that note, thank you very much, the panel, for your kind participation in this event. Thank you, Michael, for your outstanding paper, and I'm quite sure we have learned a lot from you. With that note, thank you, Daira, for hosting such an engaging discussion.